probably already planning how he'd continue manipulating me while hiding his affair and his debts. What he didn't know was that I wasn't planning a reconciliation. I was planning something entirely else. Something that would expose every lie, reveal every betrayal, and make sure he could never hurt me or anyone else again. That night at Gloria's, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the conversation I'd overheard weeks ago, about Loretta whispering those words that had haunted me ever since. I'm tired of being hidden. You promised me. She'd been tired of being hidden, of being Theodore's secret. Well, tomorrow night, there would be no more secrets. Tomorrow night, everything hidden would be brought into the light. And I was ready. Gloria helped me prepare everything for that dinner. We spent hours going over the plan, making sure every detail was perfect. She was the only person who knew what I was really planning, and even she looked worried when I explained the full scope of it. "Are you sure about this?" she asked me the night before. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Theodore is going to be humiliated. Loretta is going to be exposed. Are you ready for the fallout?" I looked at my best friend, this woman who'd stuck by me even after I dragged her into my mess, and I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They took everything from me. My money, my dignity, my trust. They made me feel crazy for questioning what was right in front of my face. It's time for the truth to come out. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me take you back a few weeks to show you exactly how I got to that point. Because the journey from broken, crying wife to the woman planning her revenge wasn't a straight line. It was messy and painful and full of discoveries that nearly destroyed me. After I'd overheard Theodore and Loretta planning to scam me in the divorce, I went back to Gloria's apartment and really looked at what I'd gathered so far. The gambling records were damning enough. Years of losses, hundreds of thousands of dollars gone to online poker sites and sports betting. But as I dug deeper into the financial records, I found something that made my stomach turn. Our savings account, the one that I'd been depositing money into every single week from my paychecks, was completely empty. Not just low, not just overdrawn, completely empty, with a balance of $0 and 0 cents. I logged into the account history and traced where the money had gone. Every single deposit I'd made over the past 2 years had been transferred out within days, sometimes within hours. The transfers went to accounts I didn't recognize, accounts that weren't in my name. I tried to access those accounts, but I didn't have the passwords or security information. Theodore had locked me out of my own money. I sat there staring at the computer screen, watching my paychecks disappear into Theodore's secret accounts, and I felt something break inside me that hadn't broken before. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. He'd been systematically stealing from me while I worked myself out in the ground trying to save us. I printed out every transaction, every transfer, every statement. The pile of papers grew higher and higher, a physical representation of how thoroughly he'd robbed me. When I was done, I had documentation showing that over $70,000 had been transferred from our joint account into accounts only he controlled. $70,000. That was money from my overtime shifts, my weekend doubles, the meals I'd skipped, and the clothes I hadn't bought. That was money that should have been building our future, saving for Diane's education, giving us security. Instead, it had vanished into Theodore's gambling addiction and God knows what else. But that wasn't even the worst of it. As I kept digging through our financial records, I found loan applications in both our names. Loans I'd never agreed to, never even knew existed. My signature was on the applications, but I knew I'd never signed them, which meant Theodore had forged my signature to get money he couldn't qualify for alone. There were 5 different loans, totaling nearly $200,000, all with my forged signature on the paperwork. Some were from legitimate banks, but others were private lenders with aims I didn't recognize. The interest rates were astronomical, some as high as 20%. We'd never be able to pay them back, not in a lifetime of working. I took photos of every document, making sure to capture the signatures that weren't mine, the dates when Theodore supposedly gotten my approval. This was fraud, plain and simple, criminal fraud. And I had the proof. Gloria came home from her shift to find me surrounded by papers, my laptop open to screen after screen of financial records. She took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong.
"What did you find?" she asked quietly, sitting down beside me. I showed her everything: the emptied savings account, the forged loan documents, the gambling records showing losses that exceeded our annual household income. With each piece of evidence, Gloria's expression grew darker. "Teresa, this is serious," she said when I'd finished. "This isn't just about divorce anymore. He's committed fraud. He's stolen from you. You need to report this to the police." "Not yet," I told her. "If I go to the police now, he'll just claim it was a misunderstanding, that we had an agreement, that I knew about everything. It'll be his word against mine. I need more evidence. I need to prove that he did this deliberately, that he's been lying and manipulating from the start." Gloria looked skeptical, but she trusted my judgment. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. If Theodore finds out what you're doing—" "He won't," I interrupted. "He thinks I'm just a broken, pathetic wife who can't function without him. He has no idea what I'm capable of." And that was true. Theodore had underestimated me our entire marriage. He'd seen me as someone to be managed and manipulated, someone who'd believe whatever story he told and never question too deeply. He'd mistaken my love and trust for weakness. That was going to be his biggest mistake. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with gathering information. I accessed every account we had, documented every transaction, saved every email and message I could find. I created a timeline of Theodore's lies, matching up his excuses with what he'd actually been doing. It was like watching our entire marriage dissolve before my eyes, seeing how almost nothing he'd told me was true. But I needed more than just financial records. I needed to understand the full scope of Theodore's betrayal. That's when I decided to look more deeply into Loretta's background. I started with social media, searching for her profiles on every platform I could think of. Her Facebook was set to private, but her Instagram was public, and what I found there made everything click into place in the most horrible way possible. Loretta had hundreds of photos on her Instagram, going back years. Most recent ones showed her life in Houston, pictures of her with Diane, photos of our house and neighborhood. But when I scrolled back to posts from 3 or 4 years ago, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a photo of Loretta with another woman who looked strikingly similar to her. Same features, same smile, clearly a sister. The caption read, "Miss you so much, Claudette. Can't wait till you come visit." And tagged in the photo was an account for someone named Claudette Holt. I clicked on Claudette's profile, and the first thing I saw was a photo of her with Theodore. Not recent. This was from about 6 years ago, before Theodore and I had even met. They were at some kind of party, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera. The caption said, "My baby looking fine tonight." I scrolled through more of Claudette's photos, and there were dozens of them with Theodore. Pictures of them at restaurants, at the beach, at what looked like friends' houses. They'd been together for at least a year, maybe more, based on the timeline of the photos. And then suddenly the photos stopped. No more pictures with Theodore, no more couple captions, just Claudette living her life and eventually photos of her with a new man. I went back to Loretta's profile and looked more carefully at the relationship between the sisters. They were clearly close, constant comments on each other's posts, photos together at family gatherings, that kind of thing. And then I found it.
a comment thread from about 3 years ago when Claudette had posted something vague about being hurt by someone she trusted. Loretta had commented, "He never deserved you, sis. One day he'll get what's coming to him." And Claudette had replied, "He will. I'll make sure of it." My hands were shaking as I screenshotted everything. Theodore hadn't just hired a random nanny. He'd brought his ex-girlfriend's sister into our home. Either he was so stupid he hadn't realized the connection, or, and this seems more likely, Loretta had specifically sought us out as part of some revenge plot she and her sister had been planning. But if that was true, why was Loretta sleeping with Theodore? Why was she helping him hide money and plan to scam me in the divorce? None of it made sense until I thought about the conversation I'd overheard with the loan shark. Loretta had said her brother knew people who could help restructure debt. Her brother, not her sister. I went back to Loretta's Instagram and looked for mentions of brothers. It took some digging, but I finally found a photo from a family gathering about 5 years ago. There were several people in the picture, but Loretta had tagged 2 men as her brothers, Raymond McKinney and Willie Burke. Raymond McKinney. That was one of the names I'd seen in Theodore's emails about loans. And Willie Burke, that was Theodore's supposed friend who got him into that bad real estate investment. They weren't just random business associates. They were Loretta's brothers, connected to the same loan shark operation that had been threatening our family. The web of lies and manipulation was much bigger than I had imagined. This wasn't just Theodore's gambling addiction spiraling out of control. This was a coordinated scheme involving multiple people, all of them working together to trap Theodore and, by extension, me, in an inescapable web of debt. But why? What was the end game? If Loretta's sister Claudette wanted revenge on Theodore for their breakup, why go through all this elaborate planning? And if Loretta's brothers were the ones Theodore owed money to, why involve Loretta at all? The answer came to me slowly, like pieces of fog clearing to reveal a monster underneath. This wasn't about getting money from Theodore. This was about destroying him completely and destroying his new life in the process. Claudette wanted Theodore to suffer for whatever he'd done to her, so she'd gotten her brothers to loan him money they knew he couldn't pay back. Then they'd send her sister Loretta to spy on him, to document his gambling, to make sure he couldn't escape the trap they had set. But somewhere along the way, Loretta had changed the plan. Instead of just helping her brothers collect their debt and helping her sister get revenge, she'd started sleeping with Theodore. She'd gotten him to trust her, to confide in her, to include her in his schemes. She was playing both sides, helping her brothers keep tabs on Theodore while also positioning herself to take whatever she could get from the situation. And I was the collateral damage. The innocent wife who'd been working herself to death trying to save a marriage that had been doomed from the start. The one person in this entire mess who'd done nothing wrong, and I was the one who'd lost everything. I printed out every Instagram screenshot, every photo showing the connections between Theodore, Loretta, Claudette, and the brothers. I made notes about the timeline, about when each person had entered Theodore's life and what role they'd played. By the time I was done, I had a complete map of the conspiracy that had destroyed my life. Gloria came home to find me sitting in the middle of her living room floor, surrounded by papers and photos, looking like some kind of detective from a crime show. "What is all this?" she asked her, setting down her purse. "Proof," I told her. "Proof that Theodore didn't just fall into debt and happen to have an affair. Proof that this was all planned, that Loretta's family set him up and she's been playing him from the start." I walked Gloria through everything I discovered, watching her expression change from confusion to shock to anger. "Oh my God, Teresa, this is insane," she said when I'd finished. "This isn't just about divorce anymore. He's committed fraud. He's stolen from you. You need to report this to the police. I will, I promised, but not yet. There's something else I need to do first. That's when I told Gloria about my plan to contact the investigative journalists. Theodore has hurt other people besides me. I found evidence that he scammed at least 5 other women out of their savings over the years. They deserve to know the truth, too. They deserve justice. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. You're not just trying to divorce him, she finally said. You're trying to take him down completely.
Yes, I admitted. Is that wrong? No, Gloria said firmly. After everything he's done, after all the lies and the theft and the betrayal, he deserves everything that's coming to him. I'm just worried about you. This is going to get messy. It's already messy, I pointed out. At least this way, maybe something good can come out of it. Maybe other women won't fall for his lies. Maybe Loretta and her family will face consequences for what they've done. Maybe... My voice broke slightly. Maybe I'll get to feel like I'm not completely powerless in my own life anymore. Gloria pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry on her shoulder for a few minutes. Then I dried my tears, straightened my spine, and got back to work. I had an email to write. The email to Eddie Reeves, the investigative journalist, was harder to write than I'd expected. How do you summarize years of lies and manipulation into a few paragraphs? How do you make someone care about your story when they probably get hundreds of messages like this every week? I decided to lead with the facts. Theodore Warren had defrauded at least 5 women out of their savings. He'd forged loan documents using his wife's signature. He'd been involved with the loan shark operation run by people connected to his mistress, and all of it could be proven with documentation. I attached samples of the evidence I'd gathered, just enough to show I wasn't making this up, but not so much that he'd have the whole story without meeting with me. Then I hit send and waited. Eddie replied within 2 hours. "This is explosive," his email said. "When can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Houston 2 days later. I was nervous as I drove there, constantly checking my mirrors to make sure Theodore wasn't following me. The paranoia was probably excessive, but after everything I discovered, I wouldn't put anything past him. Eddie Reeves was younger than I'd expected, maybe in his early 30s, with the kind of intense focus that made you feel like you were the most important person in the world when he looked at you. We sat in a corner booth, and I spread out my evidence on the table between us. He looked through everything carefully, occasionally asking questions or making notes. When he got to the photos showing the connections between Loretta, her siblings, and Theodore, he let out a low whistle. "This is bigger than one man's gambling problem," he said. "This is an organized scheme. These people have probably done this to other victims too." That thought hadn't even occurred to me. "You think there are other people they trapped like this?" "I'd bet money on it," he said. "Loan sharks like Raymond McKinney don't operate small scale. If he's willing to go to these lengths with your husband, he's done it before. Maybe dozens of times. And if Loretta is willing to move into someone's house and pretend to be their nanny just to spy on them, this isn't her first rodeo either." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about me and Theodore anymore. This was about a criminal enterprise that was destroying people's lives, and I'd stumbled into evidence that could bring the whole thing down. "What do you need from me?" I asked Eddie.
Everything you have, he said. Every document, every photo, every email. I'll verify it all independently. Interview the other women Theodore scanned, dig into Loretta's family background. But I need your permission to use your story as the centerpiece of the investigation. It's the most complete picture we have of how their operation works. I thought about what that would mean. My name in the paper, my marriage and its failures exposed for everyone to see. People I knew reading about how stupid I've been, how blind, how easily manipulated. It would be humiliating, but it would also be the truth. And maybe, just maybe, it would prevent other people from falling into the same trap. I have your permission, I told Eddie. Use whatever you need. We spent 3 hours at that coffee shop, with Eddie asking detailed questions about everything I'd discovered. He was particularly interested in the forged signatures on the loan documents and the evidence of Theodore's gambling. This is criminal fraud, he said. Once this story breaks, the police are going to get involved whether Theodore wants them to or not. Good, I said simply. As we were wrapping up, Eddie looked at me with something like admiration. Most people in your situation would just file for divorce and try to move on. What made you decide to fight back like this? I thought about that question for a moment. I spent years making myself smaller so Theodore could feel bigger. I worked myself sick trying to save a marriage he'd already destroyed. I believed his lies because I wanted so badly for them to be true. But the night I found him with Loretta, something changed. I realized that being a good wife, being loving and trusting and forgiving, didn't protect me from being hurt. So maybe it was time to stop being so good. Maybe it was time to be smart instead. Eddie smiled. Well, you're definitely being smart. This story is going to blow up. Are you prepared for that? No, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. After meeting with Eddie, I contacted Maddie Burke, the divorce attorney Gloria had recommended. Maddie had a reputation for being tough and ruthless, the kind of lawyer who didn't back down from a fight. When I called her office, her assistant tried to schedule me for 2 weeks out, but when I mentioned I had evidence of fraud and criminal activity, Maddie agreed to see me that same day. Her office was in a high-rise building in downtown Houston, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. Maddie herself was in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly and gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a legal pad. So I did. For the 3rd time in as many days, I walked someone through the entire story. Theodore's gambling, the debts, Loretta's true identity, the forged signatures, the conspiracy. Maddie listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression getting harder with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at me appraisingly. "You've built a hell of a case," she said. "Most people in your situation would just file for divorce and try to move on. You've come with documentation and proof. That's going to make this much easier." "Easier?" I asked. "How is any of this easy?" "Easier than fighting blind," Maddie clarified. "Your husband thinks he's been clever, hiding money and forging documents and positioning himself to claim poverty in the divorce. But he's left a paper trail a mile long. With the evidence you've gathered, we can prove fraud, theft, and misappropriation of marital assets. We can get court orders freezing his account so he can't hide anything else. We can make sure you get what's rightfully yours in the divorce settlement." Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in weeks. "You really think we can win?" "I don't think, honey. I know." Maddie leaned forward, her eyes intense. But I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Theodore is going to fight back. He's going to say terrible things about you, make accusations, try to paint you as the bad guy. His lawyer is going to argue that you knew about everything, that you were complicit. Are you prepared for that? I thought about everything I'd been through. The exhaustion of working 4 shifts in a row, the humiliation of selling my grandmother's ring, the betrayal of finding my husband with another woman, the soul-crushing realization that almost everything in my marriage was a lie.
Let them say whatever they want, I told Maddie. I know the truth, and soon everyone else will too. Maddie smiled, and it was the smile of a predator spotting prey. That's what I wanted to hear. Now, let's talk strategy. We spent 2 hours mapping out the divorce proceedings. Maddie explained that we'd file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and fraud. We'd request immediate injunctions preventing Theodore from selling or transferring any assets. We'd demand full financial disclosure, including access to all his accounts and records. And we'd use the evidence of forged signatures to argue that he'd committed fraud against me, which would impact how assets were divided. The goal is to hit him from every direction at once, Maddie explained. File the divorce papers, get the injunctions in place, freeze his accounts, and expose his fraud, all before he has time to react. By the time he understands what's happening, it'll be too late for him to hide anything else. What about Loretta? I asked. And her brothers, the loan sharks? That's where it gets interesting, Maddie said. Normally, I'd say the criminal stuff is separate from the divorce. But in this case, Theodore's involvement with loan sharks and his relationship with their sister is directly relevant to the marital assets. We can argue that any money he's given to Loretta or her brothers should be considered marital waste, money that should have gone to supporting the family, but instead went to supporting his criminal activities and affair. The more Maddie explained, the more I understood how thoroughly Theodore had screwed himself. His lies and schemes had created a legal paper trail that would destroy him in divorce court. His affair with Loretta gave me grounds for an at-fault divorce. His forged signatures constituted criminal fraud. There was no scenario where he came out of this looking anything but guilty. There's one more thing, I told Maddie, and I explained about Eddie Reeves and the investigative article. I know that might complicate things legally. Actually, it helps us, Maddie interrupted. Public pressure often moves legal cases along faster. And if the story reveals that Theodore is part of a larger criminal conspiracy, that gives us even more ammunition. Just make sure Eddie coordinates with me before publishing anything, so we can time things strategically. I left Maddie's office feeling more empowered than I had in years. I had a lawyer who believed me. I had evidence that would hold up in court. I had a journalist ready to expose Theodore's lies to the world. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was the one in control. But there was still more work to do. I needed to get into our house and gather physical evidence while Theodore wasn't home. I needed to document everything that was there. Loretta's expensive belongings that had been bought with stolen money, Theodore's gambling records if he kept any physical copies, anything that could strengthen our case. Glory wasn't happy about this plan. She said it's too risky when I told her. What if Theodore comes home early? What if Loretta catches you? Then I'll tell them I'm getting more of my things. They can't stop me from entering my own house, Gloria. Legally, I still live there. I have every right to be there. Legally, yes, but these aren't people who care much about legal niceties. Raymond McKinney and his associates are loan sharks who make threats against families. Do you really want to risk being alone in that house? She had a point, but I couldn't let fear stop me now. I'll be careful, I promised. I'll go in the middle of the day when Theodore should be at work. I'll be quick, in and out in 30 minutes. Gloria sighed, but didn't try to talk me out of it. At least let me come with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, and if something goes wrong, you'll have a witness. That actually made sense, so I agreed.
2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Theodore would normally be at work, Gloria and I drove to the house I'd once called home. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the lock, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had every right to be here. This was my house too. The place was a mess. Dirty dishes in the sink, laundry scattered around, the living room littered with empty beer bottles and takeout containers. Theodore clearly stopped caring about maintaining appearances once I left. Or maybe this was what the house had always looked like when I wasn't there to clean up after him. You start upstairs, Gloria. Look for anything expensive that Loretta might have. Jewelry, electronics, designer clothes. Take photos of everything. I'm going to check Theodore's office. Theodore's office was in what was supposed to be the formal dining room. We converted it years ago when he said he needed space to work from home. The desk was covered in papers and the computer was on, just sleeping. I jiggled a mouse and the screen came to life, still logged into Theodore's email account. This was almost too easy. Theodore was usually so paranoid about his computer, always logging out and shutting down before leaving the house. But I guess when you think your wife is never coming back, you get careless. I pulled out a USB drive and started copying files. Emails, documents, photos, browsing history, everything I could find. The computer had folders labeled with gambling sites, financial records, even some scanned copies of the forged loan documents. It was like Theodore had kept a complete record of his own crimes. While files were copying, I searched through the desk drawers. Most of it was junk. Old bills, random papers, broken pens. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of manila folders, I found a notebook. Theodore's handwriting filled page after page, documenting his gambling losses, his debts, his schemes to get more money. One entry from 6 months ago made my blood run cold. Loretta moved in today. She's perfect for keeping tea off my back. Plus, she's easy to look at. This might work out better than I planned. So he'd known from the beginning who Loretta really was. This wasn't him being stupid or careless. He deliberately brought his ex-girlfriend's sister into our home, knowing that she was connected to the loan sharks because he thought he could use the situation to his advantage. And then he started sleeping with her because why not? He'd already betrayed me in every other way. I photographed every page of that notebook, my hands shaking with anger. Then I put it back exactly where I found it. I didn't want Theodore to know I'd been here. Not yet. "Theresa," Gloria called from upstairs, her voice urgent. "You need to see this." I ran to upstairs to find Gloria in Loretta's room, standing in front of the open closet. Inside were racks of expensive clothes, still with tags attached. Designer purses lined the shelves. Jewelry boxes sat on the dresser, filled with pieces that must have cost thousands of dollars each. "This is easily $50,000 worth of stuff," Gloria said, her voice shocked. "Where does she get money for all this?" "From Theodore," I said grimly. "From the money he stole from me. From the loans he took out in my name. He's been giving her everything while I worked myself to death." I photographed everything, making sure to get clear shots of price tags and designer labels. This was marital waste on a massive scale. Every dollar Theodore had spent on Loretta's wardrobe was money he took from our family, money that should have gone to taking care of Diane or paying off our legitimate debts. As I was photographing a particularly expensive handbag, something fell out of the closet shelf. A small box, plain and unremarkable. I picked it up and opened it, then nearly dropped it in shock. Inside was my grandmother's ring. The one Theodore had supposedly sold to a pawn shop years ago. The one I'd cried over for weeks. It had been here all along, hidden in Loretta's closet. He'd never sold it. He'd just taken it and kept it, probably planning to give it to Loretta eventually. I stood there holding that ring, feeling waves of emotion crash over me. Rage that he lied about selling it. Grief for all the tears I'd wasted. Relief that I found it. And determination that he would pay for every single lie. "Take it," Gloria said softly. "It's yours. It always was." I slipped the ring into my pocket. Then I kept searching and found something even more incriminating. A shoebox full of cash. I counted it quickly. $15,000 in neat stacks of hundreds. This is probably money he's been hiding, I said to Gloria. Money he planned to claim he didn't have during the divorce. I photographed the money from every angle, then put it back. Again, I didn't want Theodore knowing I'd been here. Not until it was too late for him to hide anything else. We spent another 20 minutes documenting everything we could find. Gloria photographed Loretta's room while I went through Theodore's things, finding more evidence of his double life. When we were done, we had hundreds of photos and a USB drive full of files. It was more than enough to bury him. As we were leaving, I took one last look around the house. This place had been my home for years. I decorated these rooms, cooked meals in that kitchen, played with Diane in that living room. So many memories, both good and bad. But I didn't feel sad about leaving it behind anymore. This house had never really been mine. It had been the stage for Theodore's lies, and I was ready to walk away from it forever. Gloria and I had just gotten to her car when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer it. "Is this Teresa Warren?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Evelyn Baxter. You don't know me, but I saw your name on some loan documents that showed up in my mailbox by mistake. Documents with your forged signature. I think your husband might have scammed me too." My heart started racing. "Can you tell me what happened?" Over the next 30 minutes, sitting in Gloria's car in front of my former home, I listened to Evelyn's story. She'd met Theodore at a church social 3 years ago. He told her about some business troubles, how he just needed a short-term loan to get back on his feet. She'd loaned him $20,000, and he'd promised to pay her back within 6 months. That was 3 years ago. She'd never seen a penny of it. "I'd tried to take him to court," Evelyn said, her voice tired, "but he produced documents showing that the money was actually a gift, not a loan. Documents with my signature saying I didn't expect to be repaid. But I never signed anything like that, Mrs. Warren. I would never." "He forged it," I said, my voice hard. "Just like he forged my signature on loan applications. Just like he's been forging documents for years to cover his tracks." "I knew it," Evelyn said, and she sounded like she was crying. "I knew I didn't sign that, but no one would believe me. The judge said I should have been more careful, that it was my word against his. I lost $20,000 and my reputation because people thought I was trying to back out of a gift I'd voluntarily given." "I'm so sorry," I told her. "But I want you to know that Theodore is going to face justice. I'm working with a lawyer and a journalist, and we're gathering evidence against him. Would you be willing to share your story?" "Yes," Evelyn said immediately. "Absolutely yes. If there's any way to stop him from doing this to other people, I want to help." I gave her Maddie Burke's contact information and Eddie Reeves' email address. After I hung up, I just sat there in shock. Evelyn was the 6th victim I knew about. How many more were out there? How many other women had Theodore charmed and manipulated and stolen from? "This is bigger than we thought," Gloria said quietly. "I know. And that's why we have to make sure he can't do it anymore, whatever it takes." Over the next week, 3 more women contacted me. The loan documents in my name had apparently been sent to multiple addresses by mistake, probably a mix-up by whatever shady lender Theodore was working with. Each woman had a similar story. They'd loaned Theodore money for various emergencies or business opportunities. He'd promised to pay them back, and then he disappeared or produced documents claiming the loans were actually gifts. Between the 3 new women and Evelyn, Theodore had stolen nearly $100,000. And those were just the ones who'd found my contact information. There were probably others who never connected the dots, who were still sitting at home wondering why that nice man from church or work or their book club had betrayed their trust. I put all of these women in touch with Maddie and Eddie. Maddie said having multiple victims strengthened our case enormously. It showed a pattern of behavior, not just one mistake or misunderstanding. Eddie was ecstatic because it made his story even bigger and more impactful. This guy is a serial con artist, and he's been operating for years right under everyone's noses. This story is going to be front page news, Teresa. Are you ready for that level of attention? I wasn't, but I told him to move forward anyway. Some things were more important than my comfort or privacy, like justice, like protecting other potential victims, like making sure Theodore faced real consequences for his actions instead of just charming his way into another woman's life and starting the cycle over again. Meanwhile, Maddie was finalizing our divorce filing. She drafted a comprehensive petition that included adultery, fraud, marital waste, and dissipation of assets as grounds. She'd prepared injunctions to freeze Theodore's accounts and prevent him from selling or transferring property. She'd even worked with a forensic accountant to trace every dollar Theodore had stolen or hidden. We're going to hit him with everything at once, Maddie explained during one of our meetings. File the divorce petition, serve him with the injunctions, and then Eddie's article will come out the same day. By the time Theodore understands what's happening, his accounts will be frozen, his lies will be public, and he'll be facing both civil and criminal consequences. When? I asked. Next week, Maddie said. Everything will be ready by next week. But Theodore made his move first. I got a call from our realtor, a woman named Paulette Little, who'd helped us buy the house years ago, asking me if I was aware that Theodore was trying to sell the house. He what? I said, my voice sharp. He came by my office yesterday, said you two were separating and needed to sell the house quickly to divide the assets. He wanted me to list it at a price well below market value for a quick sale. Something felt off about it, so I wanted to check with you first. Thank God for honest people. If Paulette had just listed the house without questioning it, Theodore could have sold it for cash, under market value, pocketed the money, and claimed in a divorce that we'd sold it to pay debts. I'd never see a penny of it. Do not list that house, I told Paulette firmly. Theodore doesn't have the authority to sell it without my signature, and I'm not signing anything. If he contacts you again, please let me know immediately. After I hung up with Paulette, I called Maddie. He's trying to sell the house. We need to move now before he manages to hide anything else. Agreed, Maddie said. I'll file the papers today. Can you be available tomorrow for serving Theodore? Absolutely. Good. And Teresa, once we do this, there's no going back. Theodore is going to be furious. He might try to retaliate. Are you somewhere safe? I'm at Gloria's, and I'm not scared of him anymore. I'm done being afraid.
That night, I could barely sleep. Everything was coming together so fast. Tomorrow, Theodore would be served with divorce papers. His accounts would be frozen, and within days, Eddie's article would expose him to the world. The life he'd built on lies was about to come crashing down. Gloria found me sitting at her kitchen table at 3 a.m, unable to rest. You okay? She asked, sitting down across from me. I'm terrified, I admitted, but also excited? Is that wrong? To be excited about destroying someone's life? You're not destroying his life, Gloria said firmly. You're revealing the life he's been living all along. There's a difference. Theodore destroyed his own life through his choices. You're just making sure he faces the consequences. What if I'm making a mistake? I whispered. What if this all blows up in my face? Then we deal with it, Gloria said, together. But Teresa, you've spent years making yourself small to accommodate Theodore's lies. Don't do that anymore. Don't second-guess yourself now that you're finally fighting back. She was right. I'd spent too long being the understanding wife, the forgiving partner, the woman who believed the best in people even when they showed me their worst. It was time to be someone different, someone stronger, someone who demanded justice instead of hoping for mercy.
The next morning, Maddie called to let me know Theodore had been served with the divorce papers at his office. He tried to refuse them, she said, sounding amused. But the process server was insistent. He's served, and I've already filed the injunctions with the court. As of 10 minutes ago, all his accounts are frozen, pending the divorce proceedings. How long before he realizes what's happening? He probably already knows about the divorce papers. The frozen accounts will take a few hours to process through the banking system. I'd say by end of business today, he'll understand the full scope of what he's facing. Good, I said, and I meant it. Theodore called me 17 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to desperate. Teresa, what the hell is this? You can't just file for divorce without talking to me first. By the 5th message, his tone had changed. Baby, please, we need to talk about this. I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it. The last message, left at nearly 6 p.m., was pure rage. You think you're so smart, freezing my accounts? You think this is over? I'll make sure you don't get a penny in this divorce. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are. I saved every voicemail. They'd be useful in court, showing his volatile behavior and vindictiveness. That evening, Eddie called to let me know the article was ready to publish. I'm planning to run it day after tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a heads up. It's comprehensive, Teresa. I interviewed all the women Theodore scammed. I dug into Loretta's family and their loan shark operation. I've got multiple sources confirming Theodore's gambling addiction. When this comes out, it's going to be big. I'm ready, I told him, even though I wasn't sure that was true. There's one more thing, Eddie said, his voice careful. I reached out to Claudette Holt, Loretta's sister, Theodore's ex-girlfriend. She agreed to an interview. My heart started racing. What did she say? That's the interesting part. She claims she had no idea what her siblings were doing. Says she broke up with Theodore years ago because he was a compulsive liar and she suspected he was gambling away his paychecks. She's shocked that Loretta and her brothers used her past relationship with Theodore as a way to target him. Do you believe her? Eddie was quiet for a moment. I think she's telling the truth. The timeline doesn't quite work for her to be involved. She's been living in Chicago for the past 3 years, and most of the scheme has happened in that time frame. I think Loretta and her brothers used Claudette's history with Theodore as justification for what they were doing, but Claudette herself wasn't part of it. So it was just Loretta and her brothers, just 3 people who decided to systematically destroy Theodore's life, and mine in the process. In a strange way, that made it worse. If Claudette had been seeking revenge for some terrible wrong Theodore had done to her, at least there would be some logic to it. But this was just opportunistic cruelty, taking advantage of Theodore's weaknesses to trap him in debt and then milking him for everything they could get. Not that Theodore was innocent. He made the choice to gamble. He chose to forge my signature. He decided to start an affair with Loretta, even knowing who she really was. Nobody forced him to do any of those things. But Loretta and her brothers had certainly made everything worse. What about Loretta? I asked Eddie. Have you tried to interview her? She's not returning my calls, he admitted. Neither are her brothers. I suspect they know something is coming and they're laying low. Will you still publish without their side of the story? Absolutely. I've given them multiple opportunities to comment. If they choose not to, that's on them. The story runs day after tomorrow, morning edition. After I hung up with Eddie, I sat there thinking about everything that was about to happen. In less than 48 hours, Theodore's lives would be exposed to the entire city. Everyone we knew would read about his gambling, his fraud, his affair. His business would be destroyed. His reputation would be shattered. And he'd face criminal charges for the forged documents. Part of me felt guilty. Despite everything he'd done, he was still the man I'd once loved, the father of my child. Was I being too vindictive? Too cruel? But then I thought about all the nights I'd worked myself to exhaustion, about selling my grandmother's ring and my mother's pearls, about Evelyn Baxter and the other women who'd lost their savings to Theodore's lies, about young mothers who might be his next targets if someone didn't stop him. No, I wasn't being too cruel. I was finally being strong enough to demand justice. The day before Eddie's article was set to publish, Gloria and I were sitting in her living room when someone knocked on the door. Gloria looked through the peephole, and her face went pale. "It's Theodore," she whispered. My first instinct was to hide, but I'd forced myself to stand up straight. "Let him in," I said. "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's time we talked." Gloria opened the door, and Theodore pushed past her into the apartment. He looked terrible, unshaven, disheveled, his eyes wild with anger and fear. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Teresa?" "Getting a divorce," I said calmly. "I thought that was obvious from the papers you were served." "You froze my accounts. I can't access my own money." "You mean you can't access my money?" I corrected. "The money you stole from me. The money you took from our savings and our joint account, and loans you fraudulently took out in my name." "That's bullshit," he said, but his eyes darted away from mine. "That money was for family expenses, for handling our debts." "Really?" "Because I have documentation showing that $70,000 was transferred from our joint account into accounts only you controlled. I have proof that you forged my signature on 5 separate loan applications. I have records of you spending tens of thousands of dollars on Loretta's wardrobe while telling me we couldn't afford groceries."
Theodore's face went from red to pale. Did you really think I was that stupid?" I asked, and my voice was cold. "Did you think I'd just work myself to death forever while you gambled and lied and cheated? Did you think I'd never figure out what you were doing?" "Teresa, listen to me." "No, you listen," I interrupted. "For years, I listened to your excuses and your lies. I believed you when you said business was slow. I trusted you when you said you'd pay back Gloria. I defended you to anyone who questioned what was happening. And the whole time, you were gambling away our lives and sleeping with a woman who was sent to spy on us by loan sharks." "Loretta wasn't. It's not what you think." "I know exactly who Loretta is," I said. "She's the sister of your ex-girlfriend, Claudette. Her brothers are Raymond McKinney and Willie Burke, the loan sharks you're indebted to. She was planted in our home to make sure you couldn't run away from your debts. And then you started sleeping with her because apparently there's no betrayal you won't commit." Theodore stared at me, and I could see him processing the fact that I knew everything, that all his carefully constructed lies had been unraveled. "If you know all that, then you know they're dangerous," he finally said. "You need to drop this divorce, Teresa. You need to help me figure a way out of this situation. If you don't, they're going to come after our family." "Our family?" I laughed bitterly. "You destroyed our family, Theodore. You gambled it away. You lied it away. You cheated it away. There is no our family anymore." "What about Diane? She needs her father." "She needs a father who doesn't lie and steal and cheat. She needs a father who isn't involved with criminals. Maybe prison will give you time to become that person, though I doubt it." His eyes widened. "Prison? Did you think forging signatures was legal? Did you think stealing from your wife was legal? The divorce is the least of your problems, Theodore. When Eddie Reeves publishes his article tomorrow, the police are going to get involved. You're going to face criminal charges." "Eddie Reeves? The investigative journalist? You talked to a journalist about our private marriage?" "I talked to a journalist about your crimes, about the women you scammed, about the fraud you committed, about the conspiracy involving Loretta and her brothers. This stopped being about our private marriage the moment you involved other victims." Theodore stared at me, and I could see him processing the fact that I knew everything, that all his carefully constructed lies had been unraveled. "If you know all that, then you know they're dangerous," he finally said.
You need to drop this divorce, Teresa. You need to help me figure a way out of this situation. If you don't, they're going to come after our family." "Our family?" I laughed bitterly. "You destroyed our family, Theodore. You gambled it away. You lied it away. You cheated it away. There is no our family anymore." "What about Diane? She needs her father." "She needs a father who doesn't lie and steal and cheat. She needs a father who isn't involved with criminals. Maybe prison will give you time to become that person, though I doubt it." His eyes widened. "Prison? Did you think forging signatures was legal? Did you think stealing from your wife was legal? The divorce is the least of your problems, Theodore. When Eddie Reeves publishes his article tomorrow, the police are going to get involved. You're going to face criminal charges." "Eddie Reeves? The investigative journalist? You talked to a journalist about our private marriage?" "I talked to a journalist about your crimes, about the women you scammed, about the fraud you committed, about the conspiracy involving Loretta and her brothers. This stopped being about our private marriage the moment you involved other victims." Theodore lunged forward, and for a second, I thought he might try to hurt me, but Gloria stepped between us, her phone in her hand. "Touch her, and I call the police," she said firmly. "You need to leave, Theodore, now." "This isn't over," Theodore said, pointing at me. "You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you started. When this all comes out, when people see what kind of vindictive woman you are, you'll wish you just kept your mouth shut." "Get out," I said quietly. He left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. After he was gone, I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. Gloria sat beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. "You did great," she said. "You didn't back down. You didn't let him manipulate you." "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if he's right? What if trying to expose him puts us in danger?" "We'll deal with it," she said. "And besides, you're not alone in this anymore. You have Maddie, you have Eddie, you have me. And tomorrow when that article comes out, everyone will know the truth. Theodore won't be able to hide anymore, and neither will Loretta or her brothers." That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, half expecting more threatening calls from Theodore, or maybe even from Raymond McKinney or Willie Burke. But there was nothing, just silence. Eddie's article published early the next morning, front page of the Houston Chronicle. The headline read, "Local Insurance Agent's Secret Life, Gambling Addiction, Fraud, and a Family Conspiracy." Under it was a photo of Theodore from his company website, looking professional and trustworthy. The irony was painful. I read through the article with my heart pounding. Eddie had done an incredible job. He laid out everything: Theodore's gambling losses, totaling over $300,000, the 5 women he scammed, the forged loan documents, Loretta's true identity and her connection to loan sharks, even the affair. Every claim was backed up with documentation and multiple sources. The section about me was brief and focused on facts rather than emotion. Theodore's wife, who asked not to be named, worked multiple nursing shifts to support the family while her husband gambled away their savings. She had no knowledge of his activities until recently, when she discovered evidence of fraud and adultery. She is currently pursuing divorce proceedings and has filed a complaint with Houston police regarding the forged documents. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Friends and colleagues from the hospital asking if I was okay. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years wanting to know if the article was true. Even some of Theodore's friends calling to say they had no idea and they were sorry for what I'd been through. But the call that mattered most came from a Houston police detective named Samuel Reeves. "Mrs. Warren, I read the article in this morning's paper. I'd like to speak with you about the allegations of fraud and forgery. Would you be available to come to the station this afternoon?" "Yes, absolutely." I spent 3 hours at the police station that afternoon, walking Detective Reeves through everything I'd discovered. I showed him the forged loan documents. I gave him copies of the banking records showing Theodore's theft. I provided him with contact information for all the women Theodore had scammed. By the time I left, Detective Reeves told me they'd be opening a formal investigation and Theodore would likely be facing multiple charges. These are serious crimes, Mrs. Warren. Your husband is looking at significant prison time if convicted. Are you prepared for that outcome? I thought about Diane, who would grow up with her father in prison. I thought about the life I'd imagined when I married Theodore, how different it had turned out. I thought about all the women he'd hurt and all the potential future victims. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. When I got back to Gloria's apartment, there were 3 news vans parked outside, reporters with cameras wanting to interview the wife of the fraudster who'd conned multiple women and involved his family with loan sharks. Gloria had refused to let them in, but they were still waiting, hoping to catch me. We can go out the back, avoid them completely. But I shook my head. No, I'm done hiding. I walked out the front door and faced the cameras. A dozen microphones were shoved in my direction, reporters shouting questions all at once. I held up my hand for quiet, and surprisingly, they listened. I'm not going to answer questions about my husband's crimes, I said clearly. That's a matter for the police and the courts, but I will say this. If you've been scammed by Theodore Warren, if he's borrowed money from you under false pretenses, please contact the Houston Police Department. You're not alone, and you deserve justice too. Mrs. Warren, did you have any idea what your husband was doing? One reporter called out.
No, I said simply. I trusted him. That was my mistake, and I've learned from it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a daughter to take care of. I walked through the crowd of reporters and back into Gloria's apartment, my head held high. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not Theodore's wife, not a victim, just Teresa, a woman who'd been knocked down but had gotten back up and was ready to keep fighting. That night, Gloria and I were watching the news coverage of Theodore's scandal when my phone rang one more time. It was Paulette Little, a realtor. Teresa, I wanted you to know, Theodore came by my office again today. He was desperate to list the house, said he needed to sell it immediately before the divorce proceedings advanced any further. He even offered to sign away his commission if I could find a cash buyer by the end of the week. My heart started racing. What did you tell him? I told him that without your signature, the sale can't proceed. But Teresa, he seemed frantic, almost panicked. I think he's trying to hide money before the courts can track it all down. Thank you for letting me know, I said. Can you do me a favor? If he contacts you again, tell him you found a potential buyer who's interested but needs to see the house first. Set up a showing for next week. Paulette was quiet for a moment. Why do I feel like you're planning something? Because I am, I said. And when it's over, Theodore won't be able to hurt anyone ever again. After I hung up, Gloria looked at me with concern. What are you thinking? I smiled, and it felt good to smile again. I'm thinking it's time for the final act. Time to bring this whole thing to an end in a way Theodore never sees coming. And how are you going to do that? Remember how I told you I was planning a dinner where we'd all talk things through? It's time to make that happen. Time to get Theodore, Loretta, and anyone else involved in this mess together in one place. Time to play my last card. Gloria's eyes widened. That peace dinner you mentioned to Theodore, you're actually going to do it. I'm actually going to do it, I confirmed. And when it's over, everyone will know the truth. The whole truth. And Theodore's carefully constructed world of lies will finally come crashing down completely. When? Soon, I said, already planning the details in my mind. Very soon. The next few days were a blur of activity. I coordinated with Maddie about the legal strategy. I spoke with Detective Reeves about the criminal investigation. I fielded calls from reporters and well-wishers and people who just wanted the gossip.
Through it all, I kept thinking about that dinner, about how I was going to orchestrate the final confrontation that would bring everything into the open. Paulette called me back 2 days after our last conversation. Theodore took the bait, she said, sounding both amused and concerned. I told him I had a cash buyer interested in the house, someone willing to pay asking price for a quick close. He was so excited he almost cried. We've scheduled a showing for Thursday at 7 p.m. Perfect, I said. That gives me time to set everything else up. Teresa, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning justice, I told her simply. I'm planning justice. I spent the next week preparing. I copied all my evidence onto a tablet, organizing it into folders that would be easy to navigate. I practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to present everything. I contacted Eddie Reeves and asked if he'd be willing to be present for what I was planning. He agreed immediately, sensing the story wasn't over yet. I also did something I hadn't done since leaving the house. I called Theodore. He answered on the first ring, his voice eager and desperate. Teresa, baby, I've been trying to reach you. I know, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I've been thinking about everything, about us, about Diane, about what's best for everyone. I knew you'd come around, he said, relief flooding his voice. I knew you'd realize that we need to work together on this. When can we talk? Thursday night, I said. Come to the house at 7. Just you and me. We need to have a real conversation about how to move forward. The house? He sounded surprised. You're coming back home? I'm coming to talk, I corrected. Don't read too much into it, Theodore. Just be there at 7 and come alone. This conversation needs to be private. He agreed eagerly, probably already planning how he'd manipulate me into dropping the divorce and helping him hide more money. Poor Theodore. He still thought he was the smart one. Next, I called Loretta. I've gotten her number from the contact list on our shared computer. She answered cautiously. Hello? This is Teresa. Don't hang up. I want to talk to you about Theodore. There was silence on the other end. Then, what about him? I know who you really are. I know about your sister Claudette. I know about your brothers Raymond and Willie. I know why you were really in our home. More silence. Then, quietly, what do you want? I want the truth, I said calmly, all of it. And I think you want out of this situation as badly as I do. So here's what I'm proposing. Meet me at the house Thursday night at 7:30. Theodore will be there too. It's time we all sat down and had an honest conversation about what's been happening. Why would I do that? Because right now, you're caught in the middle of a criminal investigation. The police are looking into Theodore's fraud, and you're connected to it. You've been living in our home, accepted money and gifts from him, helped him hide assets. At best, you look like an accomplice. At worst, you're facing charges yourself. But if you come clean, if you tell the truth about what your brothers made you do, about how you got trapped in this situation, that's going to look a lot better for you. I could hear her breathing on the other end, could almost hear her thinking. Will the police be there? No police, I promise. Just us, and maybe a few other people who deserve to know the truth. But I give you my word, this is about getting everything out in the open, not about getting you arrested. I need to think about it. You have until Thursday at 7:30. If you don't show up, I'll assume you're choosing to stay complicit in whatever your brothers have planned, and that's going to make things very difficult for you when this all goes to trial. I hung up before she could respond. Would she come? I wasn't sure, but I'd planted the seed of doubt, made her question whether staying loyal to her brothers was worth going down with Theodora's sinking ship. The next call was harder. I dialed Gloria's number and waited for her to pick up. I need a favor, a big one. Anything. Thursday night, I need you to watch Diane. Keep her at your place. Don't bring her anywhere near our house. Can you do that? Of course. But why? What's happening Thursday night?
Everything, I told her. Everything is happening Thursday night. I spent Wednesday preparing the house. I let myself in using my key and cleaned the place from top to bottom. I wanted it to look perfect, wanted to erase any evidence of the chaos and neglect that had taken over since I left. I set the dining room table like I was hosting a dinner party, with nice plates and glasses, and even a tablecloth I found in the linen closet. In the center of the table, I placed the tablet, my phone, and a folder containing printed copies of the most damning evidence. Everything else I'd need was already uploaded to the cloud, accessible with a few taps if necessary. I tested the audio system in the house, making sure I could play recordings clearly through the speakers. Then, I sat at that table and imagined how everything would unfold. Theodore would arrive first, expecting a private conversation where he could charm or manipulate me. Then Loretta would show up, if she came at all, and he'd realize this wasn't the conversation he'd anticipated. And then I'd present everything I'd discovered, all the lies and betrayals and crimes, with no way for either of them to deny or deflect. There would be anger. There would be accusations. There would probably be tears. But by the end of it, the truth would be out in the open where it belonged, and everyone would have to face the consequences of their choices. Eddie Reeves arrived at 6:30, as we'd arranged. I'd asked him to be present as both a witness and the journalist, to document what happened and to ensure there was an independent account of the confrontation. He brought a camera and a recording device, setting them up discreetly in corners of the room. "Are you sure about this?" he asked me as we did a final check of the equipment. "This could get intense. Theodora might become aggressive. Loretta might refuse to talk." "I'm sure. I've spent too long being passive, letting things happen to me. Tonight, I'm taking control of my story." At exactly 7 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Theodore's vehicle. He sat there for a moment, probably gathering his courage or rehearsing his lies, before getting out and walking to the front door. He still had a key, but he knocked instead, which I found oddly respectful, given everything he'd done. I opened the door and looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, for the first time in over a week. He'd cleaned himself up since his visit to Gloria's apartment, shaved and put on nice clothes. He was trying to look like the man I'd married, the one I trusted and loved. But all I could see was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Theresa," he said, and he actually smiled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know things have been complicated, but I really think we can work this out." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He walked past me into the house, heading for the living room where we usually sat. "Actually, let's talk in the dining room. I've set up everything there." He followed me, and when he saw the formal table setting, his smile widened. "You made dinner." "Not exactly," I said, gesturing for him to sit. "But I did prepare something for you." He sat down, looking confused but still hopeful. That's when Eddie Reeves stepped out from the kitchen where he'd been waiting. Theodore's face went pale. "What is he doing here?" "Mr. Reeves is here to document our conversation for the follow-up article he's writing.
You remember Eddie Reeves, don't you? The journalist who exposed your crimes last week? He started to stand up. I'm not staying if he's here. This is supposed to be a private conversation. Sit down, Theodore. And something in my voice made him obey. We're going to have a conversation, but it's not going to be the one you expected. And if you leave before we're done, I'm going to assume you're running from the truth, which won't look good when all of this goes to court. He sat back down, slowly, his eyes darting between me and Eddie Reeves. What is this, Theresa? What are you doing? I'm giving you a chance to tell the truth. For once in your life, to be honest about what you've done and why. Before he could respond, there was another knock at the door. Theodore's head whipped around. Who's that? That, I said, walking to the door, would be our other guest. I opened the door to find Loretta standing there, looking nervous and defiant at the same time. She was dressed simply, none of the expensive clothes Theodore had bought her, just jeans and a plain shirt. When she saw Theodore through the doorway, her expression shifted to something like resignation. You came, I said, genuinely surprised. I'm tired of lying, she replied quietly. I'm tired of it all. I stepped aside to let her in. When Theodore saw her, he jumped to his feet. Loretta, what are you doing here? I told you to stay away from Theresa. Actually, I invited her, I said. Please, Loretta, have a seat. The three of us sat around that dining room table, husband, wife, and mistress, with Eddie Reeves' camera recording everything. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I'm going to make this simple, I said, looking between Theodore and Loretta. I'm going to present evidence of everything that's been happening. I'm going to play recordings of conversations. I'm going to show documents. And you're both going to have the opportunity to respond, to explain yourselves, to tell your side of the story. At the end, the truth will be out in the open, where it belonged, and everyone would have to face the consequences of their choices. This is insane, Theodore said. Theresa, I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything. I picked up the tablet and pulled up the first document, the bank record showing how he'd systematically drained our savings account. Every deposit I made from my paychecks, you transferred out within days. I turned the tablet around so he could see the account numbers. His face went pale as he recognized the account numbers. That's not stealing. That money was for family expenses. Really? I pulled up another document, because I have records showing it went to online gambling sites, poker, sports betting, casino games, over $300,000 lost in the past 4 years alone. I can explain, I'm not done. I said, my voice hard. I pulled up the next set of documents. I know you forged my signature on 5 separate loan applications. $200,000 in loans I never agreed to, that I didn't even know existed until I started digging. I laid out printed copies of the loan applications on the table, pointing to the signatures that weren't mine. You committed fraud, Theodore. You used my identity to get money you couldn't get on your own, and then you gambled it all away. Theodore was shaking now, all his confidence draining away. I was trying to fix things. I thought if I could just win big once. You can't win big if you have a gambling addiction. And you do have an addiction, Theodore. I have emails between you and gambling websites dating back to 6 years. I have records of you attending underground poker games. I have proof that you've been lying to me about where you were and what you were doing for our entire marriage. I turned to Loretta, who was sitting very still, her hands folded in her lap. And you, I know who you really are. You're Claudette Holt's sister, Theodore's ex-girlfriend. Your brothers are Raymond McKinney and Willie Burke, the loan sharks Theodore owes money to. Loretta closed her eyes but didn't deny it. Theodore looked at her in shock. What? Loretta? Is that true? Yes, she said quietly. It's true. But why? Theodore's voice was almost a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't supposed to, Loretta said, and now she was looking at him with something like pity. My brothers sent me to keep an eye on you, to make sure you didn't run away from your debts. They knew you'd have a hard time disappearing if you had a nanny living in your house, someone who knew your schedules and your routines. So everything between us was a lie? Theodore asked, and he actually sounded hurt. The relationship we had? The feelings? I don't know, Loretta admitted. It started as a job. My brothers promised to forgive a debt I owed them if I'd watch you for 6 months, report back on your finances, make sure you weren't hiding money. But then... She paused, swallowing hard. Then things got complicated. Complicated how? I asked, even though I could guess the answer. He was kind to me at first, Loretta said, looking down at her hands. He'd ask about my day, remember things I told him, make me feel like I mattered. I'd been in a bad relationship before, and Theodore seemed different, seemed safe. I know how stupid that sounds now, but I believed it. So you started sleeping with him, I said flatly. Yes, Loretta whispered. And I know that was wrong. I know I destroyed your marriage and your family, and I'm sorry. But I need you to understand, I was trapped too. Once the affair started, my brothers had even more leverage over me. They told me I had to keep Theodore happy, keep him distracted, make sure he didn't get suspicious about who I really was. I pulled up another document on the tablet, the Instagram photos showing Loretta with her sister and brothers. But you weren't just keeping him distracted. You were accepting expensive gifts from him. Designer clothes, jewelry, electronics, all bought with money he stole from me. He said they were gifts, Loretta protested weakly. He said he wanted to treat me nice. With money that wasn't his, I said. With money from our savings, from loans taken out in my name, from the paychecks I earned working double shifts while you played house with my husband. Loretta was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I know it was wrong, but by the time I realized how deep I was in, it was too late to back out. My brothers would have hurt me if I'd tried to leave. And Theodore, she looked at him. You made me think we had a future together. You said once you got clear of the debts, we could be together properly. I believed you. Theodore was staring at the table, his face ashen. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse, which I suppose he was. I did say that, he admitted quietly. And I meant it. I really did have feelings for you, Loretta. While you were still married to me, I said, making sure that point was crystal clear. While I was working myself to exhaustion trying to save our family. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, Theodore said, and now he was crying too. The gambling started small, just a few hands of poker with friends. I won some money at first, and it felt good. It felt like control in a life where everything else was chaotic. But then I started losing, and I kept thinking I could win it back if I just played a little longer, bet a little more. And the loans? I prompted. The forged signatures? He I was desperate, he said, his voice breaking. I owed money to dangerous people. Raymond and Willie made it clear what would happen if I didn't pay them. They threatened our family, Teresa. They said they'd hurt you and Diane if I didn't give them what they owed. So I took out those loans because I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me the truth, I said. You could have admitted you had a problem and let me help you. But instead, you lied and you stole and you brought these dangerous people into our lives, and then you brought their sister into our home to spy on us. I didn't know Loretta was connected to them at first, Theodore insisted. I swear, I hired her thinking she was just a nanny. When I figured out who she really was, it was too late. They already had her living with us, already had eyes on everything we did. And that's when you started sleeping with her, I asked. When you realized she was spying on you for loan sharks? Theodore was quiet for a long moment. I know how it sounds, but yes, I thought if I got close to her, if she cared about me, maybe she'd protect me from her brothers. Maybe she'd warn me if they were planning something. I looked at Loretta. Is that what happened? Did you protect him? I tried. I stopped reporting everything to Raymond and Willie. I only told them what they absolutely needed to know. And when they wanted to escalate things, when they talked about sending someone to rough Theodore up or scare his family, I convinced them to wait, to give him more time. How noble, I said, and I didn't try to hide my sarcasm. You only partially betrayed the man you were sleeping with while you completely betrayed his wife. I know you hate me, Loretta said, meeting my eyes. I would hate me too if I were you, but I'm trying to be honest now. I'm trying to tell the truth about everything. Good, I said, because there's something else we need to address. I pulled up another recording on the tablet. This is from about 6 months ago, a conversation between Theodore, Loretta, and Raymond McKinney. Would you like me to play it? Both Theodore and Loretta went very still. How did you... Theodore started. I've been recording conversations in this house for the past 3 months. Every conversation I overheard, every private moment between the few. I documented it all. I pressed play. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. The voices of Theodore, Loretta, and a man I assumed was Raymond filled the room. They were discussing how to hide money from me in the divorce, how to claim poverty while transferring assets to accounts I couldn't access, how to make it look like Theodore had nothing so I'd get nothing in the settlement. She's too stupid to figure it out, Theodore's recorded voice said, and hearing him call me stupid, me, the woman who had worked herself to exhaustion for him, was like a physical blow. What about the journalist? Raymond's voice asked. If he keeps digging. I'll handle it, Theodore said. I'll discredit him if I have to, call him biased, say he's got a vendetta, whatever it takes. The important thing is keeping Teresa from finding out about the offshore accounts. I stopped the recording and looked at Theodore. Offshore accounts? You have offshore accounts? He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? I demanded. Because it sounds like you've been hiding money internationally while claiming we're drowning in debt, while I sold my grandmother's ring and my mother's pearls, while my best friend ended up in the hospital from stress because of money she loaned us, while other women lost their savings because they believed your lies. How much? I asked when he didn't respond. How much money do you have hidden offshore? About 80,000. He whispered. The number hit me like a punch. $80,000 hidden away while I worked myself sick, while we supposedly couldn't afford food or rent or anything beyond basic survival. $80,000 that could have changed everything about our situation, and he'd kept it secret.
Is that all? I asked, my voice dangerous. Or are there more secrets you want to confess while we're being honest? Theodore was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, there's another account in the Cayman Islands with about 200,000. The room went completely quiet. Even Eddie, who'd been silently filming everything, made a small noise of shock. $200,000. $250,000 hidden away while Theodore convinced me we were broke. Where did that money come from? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The loans, Theodore admitted. The ones in your name. I didn't gamble all of it. I kept some back, put it somewhere safe. I told myself it was for emergencies, for when things got really bad. But then things kept getting worse, and I could never bring myself to touch it because I knew once it was gone, there'd be nothing left. So you let me work myself to death instead, I said. You let me beg my best friend for money. You let me sell family heirlooms, all while you had $250,000 hidden away. I'm sorry, Theodore said, but the words sounded hollow. I know I've made terrible choices. I know I've hurt you beyond measure, but I never wanted any of this to happen. But it did happen because of choices you made, because of lies you told, because you were too selfish and too cowardly to face the truth of what you'd become. I turned back to the tablet and pulled up one more document. There's something else everyone needs to know. Theodore, do you want to tell them, or should I? He looked at me with dread in his eyes. Tell them what? About the other women. About Evelyn Baxter, and Gwendolyn Townsend, and Maddie Little, and Jeanette Goodman. About all the women you scammed over the years. Women who trusted you and loaned you money that you never paid back. I paid back some of them, Theodore protested weakly. You paid back less than 10% of what you borrowed, I corrected, and you did it by forging gift documents, making it look like they'd given you the money voluntarily so they had no legal recourse to get it back. I pulled up copies of the forged gift documents and laid them on the table. Evelyn Baxter loaned you $20,000 3 years ago. You produced a document with her forged signature saying it was a gift. Gwendolyn Townsend gave you $15,000 for what you said was a business emergency. You forged her signature too. The pattern repeats 6 more times that I've been able to document. 6 women, all of them trusting you, all of them losing their savings because you're a con artist. I'm not a con artist, Theodore said, but there was no conviction in his voice. I was just trying to survive. By destroying other people's lives? By stealing from women who trusted you? That's not survival, Theodore. That's predatory behavior, and it's going to stop. I looked at Eddie Reeves. Do you have everything you need? More than enough, he said, and I could see the excitement in his eyes. This story was even bigger than he had initially thought. Good, I said. I turned back to Theodore and Loretta. Here's what's going to happen next. Eddie is going to publish a follow-up article detailing everything we've discussed tonight. The offshore accounts, the additional victims, Loretta's role in the conspiracy. It's all going on the record. You can't do that, Theodore said desperately. That's our private conversation. No, I corrected. This is a documented interview that you willingly participated in. You came here of your own free will. You answered questions truthfully. Everything that was said tonight can and will be reported. I pulled out another piece of paper, a document Maddie had prepared for this exact moment. This is an asset disclosure form.
You're going to fill it out right now, listing every account you have, every piece of property, every asset you've hidden. You're going to provide account numbers, bank names, everything. And then you're going to sign it. And if I refuse, then I'm going to call Detective Reeves right now and tell him about the offshore accounts. That's evidence of fraud and money laundering. Add it to the forgery charges and the theft charges, and you're looking at 15 to 20 years in prison, Theodore. Or you can cooperate, provide full disclosure, and maybe the courts will be more lenient. Theodore looked at the form, then at me, then back at the form. His hands were shaking as he picked up the pen. For the next 30 minutes, he filled out every line, listing accounts I'd never heard of, properties I didn't know existed, assets that had been hidden for years. By the time he was done, the picture was clear. Theodore had managed to hide over $500,000 while claiming we were drowning in debt. "Sign it," I said when he'd finished. He signed, his hand trembling so bad his signature was barely legible. I turned to Loretta next. "Your turn." "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice small. "The truth," I said. "All of it. I want you to tell Eddie everything about how your brothers operate, how many other people they've trapped this way, how the loan shark business works, and I want you to testify against them when the police inevitably bring charges." "They'll kill me," Loretta whispered. If I testify against Raymond and Willie, they'll kill me." "Then I suggest you talk to Detective Reeves about witness protection, because either way, this is over. Your brother's operation is going to be exposed. The police are already investigating based on Theodore's case. You can either cooperate and save yourself, or you can stay loyal to them and go down with their ship." Loretta was quiet for a long moment, tears still streaming down her face. Then quietly, "Okay, I'll tell you everything." What followed was a 90-minute confession that Eddie recorded in full detail. Loretta explained how her brothers had been running a loan shark operation for over a decade, targeting people with gambling problems or other addictions. They'd loan money at high interest rates, then when people couldn't pay, they'd escalate, first with threats, then with violence, then with schemes like planting Loretta in someone's home to monitor them. Theodore wasn't their only victim. There had been at least 20 others over the years, maybe more. Some had lost their homes. Some had filed for bankruptcy. One man had attempted to take his own life when he couldn't escape the debt. Raymond and Willie had destroyed countless lives, and they did it with systematic precision. "Why?" I asked Loretta when she'd finished. "Why would you help them do this?" "Because I was scared," she said simply. "Raymond is my brother, but he's also dangerous. I've seen what he does to people who crossed him. When he told me to do something, I did it. I didn't think I had a choice." "You always have a choice," I said. "Maybe not a good one, but a choice. You could have gone to the police. You could have refused. Instead, you chose to help destroy families." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight. Theodore sat slumped in his chair looking like a broken man. Loretta was still crying, but quietly now, like she had run out of tears. And I felt empty, not triumphant, not vindicated. Just empty, like I had used up every ounce of energy I had to get to this moment, and now there was nothing left. Eddie packed up his equipment, promising to have the article ready within 48 hours. He said, "This is going to blow the lid off everything, not just Theodore's case, but the whole loan shark operation. You've done something incredible tonight, Teresa."
After he left, the three of us sat there in silence for a moment. Then Theodore spoke, his voice hoarse. "What happens now?" "Now?" I looked at him.
This man who'd been my husband, who I'd loved and trusted and believed in. Now you face the consequences of your choices. The divorce will proceed. The criminal charges will move forward. You'll probably go to prison, and I'll finally be free of you. And Diane? Diane will grow up knowing the truth about her father, I said. Not lies, not fairy tales, but the truth. That you were a man with an addiction who made terrible choices that hurt everyone around him. Maybe she'll learn from your mistakes. Maybe she'll grow up understanding that character matters, that honesty matters, that the easy path isn't always the right path. Can I still see her? Theodore asked, and for the first time that night, he sounded genuinely broken. Can I still be her father? That's up to the courts, I said, and up to you. If you get your life together, if you face your addiction, if you make genuine amends for what you've done, then maybe. But it won't be on your terms anymore, Theodore. You've lost the right to make demands. I stood up, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I'm leaving now. You should too. This house is going to be sold as part of the asset division, and neither of us will be living here anymore. Where will I go? Theodore asked, sounding lost. That's not my problem anymore, I said. And I meant it. I looked at Loretta one last time. You should leave Houston. Go somewhere your brothers can't find you. Talk to the police, cooperate with the investigation, and then disappear. It's the only way you're going to survive this. She nodded but didn't speak. I don't think she had any words left. I walked out of that house, my former home, and didn't look back. I got in my car and drove to Gloria's apartment, where Diane was sleeping peacefully in the spare bedroom. Gloria was still awake, waiting for me. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. It's over, I said into her shoulder. It's finally over. How do you feel? I thought about that question. How did I feel? Relieved? Angry? Sad? All of those things and none of them. I feel like I can breathe again. Like there's been a weight on my chest for years and someone just lifted it off. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Eddie's follow-up article published and caused an even bigger sensation than the first one. The offshore accounts, the additional victims, Loretta's testimony about her brother's operation. It all painted a picture of systematic fraud and criminal conspiracy that had the city reeling. Detective Reeves brought charges against Theodore for fraud, forgery, theft, and money laundering. The amount of evidence I'd gathered made it an open and shut case. Theodore's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal, and after weeks of negotiation, he agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 if he completed addiction treatment and maintained good behavior. Raymond McKenney and Willie Burke were arrested 2 weeks after Loretta's testimony went on record. They were charged with racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, and a dozen other crimes. Loretta entered witness protection, and I never saw her again. I heard through Detective Reeves that she'd relocated somewhere on the West Coast and was trying to start over. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward once all the hidden assets were on the table. With Theodore in prison and facing massive legal fees, he didn't have much leverage to fight me. Maddie negotiated a settlement that gave me full custody of Diane, the house once it sold, and 70% of the marital assets, including the offshore accounts. After all the debts were paid and the lawyers were satisfied, I walked away with about $300,000. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I got married, but it was a fresh start. It was freedom. It was the ability to finally take care of my daughter and myself without working myself to death. The women Theodore had scammed, Evelyn, Gwendolyn, and the others, filed a class action lawsuit against him. They couldn't get blood from a stone, but the court ordered that any money Theodore earned while in prison or after his release would go toward repaying them. It wasn't full restitution, but it was something. It was accountability. Gloria and I repaired our friendship. It took time and honest conversations and me genuinely apologizing for dragging her into my mess. But eventually we got back to the closeness we'd had before. She was there when I bought my new house, a small place in the suburbs with a yard for Diane. She was there when I cut back my hours at the hospital so I could actually spend time with my daughter. She was there for all of it, the way best friends should be. The women Theodore had scammed reached out to me, wanting to thank me for exposing him. We formed an unlikely support group, meeting once a month to talk about our experiences and how we were healing. Some of them became genuine friends. All of them taught me that I wasn't alone, that what happened to me had happened to others, and that there was strength in sharing our stories instead of hiding them in shame. 6 months after that dinner at the house, I got an unexpected call. It was Claudette Holt, Loretta's sister, Theodore's ex-girlfriend. She'd read about everything that had happened and wanted to apologize. I had no idea what my siblings were doing, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I swear I didn't know they had used my relationship with Theodore as a reason to target him. When I broke up with him years ago, it was because I suspected he had a gambling problem, and I didn't want to be part of that mess. But I never wanted... Her voice broke. I never wanted them to destroy his life like this. Or yours. You're not responsible for what your siblings did, I told her. Just like I'm not responsible for what Theodore did. We can only control our own choices. Still, Claudette said, I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I hope you're able to build a good life for yourself after all this. I'm working on it. And I was. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of everything I had experienced. The betrayal, the manipulation, the years of gaslighting that made me question my own perceptions. It was hard work, facing all those painful memories and emotions. But it was necessary work. I needed to understand how I ended up in that situation so I could make sure I never ended up there again. Diane was too young to fully understand what had happened, but I tried to be honest with her in age-appropriate ways. I told her that Daddy had made some bad choices and had to go away for a while to learn how to make better ones. I told her she wasn't to blame, that she was loved, that our family might look different now, but we were still a family. She cried sometimes, especially at night when she missed Theodore. But slowly, she adjusted. Children are resilient that way. I went back to school and got my master's degree in nursing, specializing in psychiatric care. I wanted to help other people who were struggling with addiction or who were recovering from abusive relationships. I wanted to take my pain and turn it into something useful, something that could help others heal. A year after Theodore went to prison, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Teresa, it's Theodore. I hadn't spoken to him since that night at the house. Hearing his voice again made my chest tight. How did you get this number? I'm allowed phone calls from prison. I've been wanting to reach out for months, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. I'm not sure I do, I said honestly. What do you want, Theodore?
I wanted to tell you I'm sorry, he said, and his voice was different than I remembered, quieter, more genuine. I know I've said that before, and I know words don't mean much after everything I've done, but I'm in a treatment program here. Real treatment, not just going through the motions. And I'm facing what I did, all of it. The lying, the stealing, the gambling, the affair. I'm finally facing it. That's good, I said carefully. That's what you should be doing. I also wanted you to know, I talked to my lawyer about the class action lawsuit.
I'm going to pay back every woman I scammed. It'll take years, maybe decades, but I'm going to do it. They deserve to get their money back." "They do," I agreed. "And Teresa," he paused like he was gathering courage, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed our marriage and our family and any chance we had at happiness. But I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you did." Grateful? I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. "You could have just divorced me and walked away," he explained. "You could have taken what you could get and moved on with your life. But instead, you exposed everything. You made sure the truth came out. You made sure I couldn't do this to anyone else. That's a courage, Teresa. It took strength, and it probably saved lives, including mine. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have kept going until something even worse happened." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never thought of what I'd done as saving Theodore. I thought of it as seeking justice, protecting others, reclaiming my dignity. But maybe those things weren't mutually exclusive. Maybe exposing him had been both revenge and rescue. "How's Diane?" Theodore asked, his voice soft. "She's good. She's in a good school. She has friends. She's happy. She asks about you sometimes." "Can I—" His voice cracked. "Can I write to her? Just letters, so she knows I'm thinking about her." "Let me think about it. I'll talk to my therapist and see what she thinks is best for Diane. But Theodore, if I do let you write to her, you have to be honest. No lies, no excuses, no making yourself the victim. If you want to be part of her life in any way, it has to be based on truth." "I understand. And Teresa, thank you for everything, even though I know I don't deserve your kindness." After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, processing the conversation. I didn't forgive Theodore, not completely, maybe not ever, but I felt something shift inside me, like a door closing on a chapter of my life that I'd been holding open without realizing it. He was my past, but he didn't have to be my prison. 2 years after everything fell apart, I met someone. His name was Samuel Warren. No relation to Theodore, just an unfortunate coincidence in last names. He was a social worker who specialized in helping families in crisis. We met at a hospital fundraiser, started talking, and discovered we had similar experiences with addiction and recovery in our families. He knew my story. Everyone in Houston knew my story after Eddie's articles, but he didn't treat me like a victim or a survivor or anything other than a person. He made me laugh. He listened when I talked. He was patient with my trust issues and my boundaries. He understood that I came with baggage, and he was okay with that. We took things slowly. No rushing into anything, no grand gestures or promises. Just two people getting to know each other, building something real and honest. Diane liked him, which mattered more than anything. He was good with her, patient and kind, never trying to replace Theodore, but creating his own relationship with her. I'm not going to tell you we got married and lived happily ever after, because life isn't a fairy tale. But I will tell you that I'm happy now, genuinely, deeply happy in a way I wasn't sure I'd ever be again. I have a job I love, helping people who are struggling with the same kinds of issues I faced. I have a daughter who's thriving. I have friends who support me and a partner who respects me. I have a home that's truly mine, not built on lies or secrets. I have peace. Sometimes, late at night, I think about everything that happened, about the wife I was, working herself to death trying to save a marriage that was already gone, about the moment I found Theodore with Loretta and felt my whole world shatter, about the weeks I spent gathering evidence and planning my revelation, about that dinner table confrontation where I finally took control of my story. Would I change any of it if I could? Part of me wants to say yes, wants to go back and warn my younger self not to trust so blindly, not to sacrifice so much, not to ignore the red flags. But then I think about who I am now, stronger, wiser, more careful, but not hardened, and I'm not sure I'd want to change the journey that made me this person. I learned that love isn't enough if it's built on lies. I learned that trust has to be earned, not just given freely. I learned that sacrifice is only meaningful if it's appreciated and reciprocated. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from someone who's hurting you, even if you still care about them. Most importantly, I learned that I'm capable of so much more than I thought. I survived betrayal that should have broken me. I fought back against people who thought I was too weak or too stupid to figure out what they were doing. I rebuilt my life from nothing and created something better than what I had before. That's what I want you to understand if you're watching this and you're in a situation like I was. If you're working yourself to exhaustion for someone who doesn't appreciate it, if you're making excuses for someone's lives, if you're sacrificing your happiness for someone who wouldn't do the same for you, you are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you know, and you deserve better than what you're settling for. It won't be easy to leave. It won't be easy to face the truth. It won't be easy to rebuild your life, but I promise you it's worth it. The peace you feel when you're no longer carrying someone else's lies, when you're living authentically and honestly, when you're finally putting yourself first, that's worth every difficult moment it takes to get there. Gloria likes to say that I didn't just survive what Theodore did to me, I transformed it. I took all that pain and betrayal and anger and I turned it into something powerful. I used it to expose a criminal operation. I used it to help other women get justice. I used it to become a better version of myself. She's right, I think. I didn't just survive. I became someone new, someone I'm proud to be. Diane is 8 years old now. She's smart and funny and brave, with none of Theodore's compulsion to lie and all the charm he had when he was at his best. She knows her father is in prison. She knows he made bad choices. But she also knows that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define you, that it's never too late to choose to be better. Last month, I let her send Theodore her first letter. She drew him a picture of our new house and told him about her school and her friends. She told him she missed him and she hoped he was learning to make better choices. It was simple and sweet and heartbreaking in the way only a child's letter can be. Theodore wrote back with a letter that made me cry. He thanked her for the picture. He told her how proud he was of her. He admitted that he'd made mistakes, but he was working hard to be someone she could be proud of too. He didn't make excuses or try to paint himself as a victim. He just told her the truth, simply and honestly. Maybe he really is changing. Maybe prison and treatment and consequences have finally taught him what years of enabling and second chances never could. Or maybe this is just another manipulation, another lie in a lifetime of lies. I don't know. But I'm willing to let Diane have a relationship with her father, supervised and careful, because she deserves the chance to know him and decide for herself who he is. That's the thing about healing. It's not linear, and it's not about perfection. It's about making the best choices you can with the information you have, setting boundaries that protect you, and being open to the possibility that people can change, while also being realistic about the probability that they won't.
As for Loretta, I never heard from her again after she entered witness protection. I hope she's building a better life somewhere, free from her brother's influence. I hope she's learned from her mistakes the way I learned from mine, but I don't think about her much anymore. She's part of my past. Like Theodore, like that house where so much of my pain happened. I've moved forward, and I've left them behind. Raymond and Willie McKinney are both serving 20-year sentences for their crimes. Detective Reeves told me they tried to fight the charges, claiming they were legitimate businessmen and everything was above board. But between Loretta's testimony, Theodore's cooperation, and the documentation from dozens of other victims who came forward after the story broke, the case against them was airtight. They'll be old men by the time they get out and hopefully too old to restart their criminal enterprise. The other women Theodore scammed, my friends from the support group, are all doing well. Evelyn went back to school and became a financial advisor, helping people protect themselves from scams. Gwendolyn started a nonprofit that provides financial literacy education to vulnerable populations. Jeanette wrote a book about her experience that became a bestseller. We all took our pain and turned it into purpose, which feels like the best kind of revenge. Sometimes people ask me if I hate Theodore. The answer is no, though it took me a long time to get there. I spent months being angry, feeling betrayed, wanting him to suffer the way I'd suffered. But hate takes energy, and I decided I'd rather use that energy to build my new life than to dwell on the old one. I don't hate him, but I don't love him either. What I feel for Theodore now is something like pity mixed with indifference. I pity the man who had everything, a wife who loved him, a beautiful daughter, a stable home, and destroyed it all because he couldn't face his demons. And I'm indifferent to whatever his life becomes from here because it's no longer connected to mine in any meaningful way. The house eventually sold, and I used my portion of the money to buy my new place and invest in Diane's future. It felt good to turn the symbol of so much pain into something positive, something that would benefit my daughter instead of being squandered on gambling or lies. I drive past the old neighborhood sometimes, though I never stop. Just seeing the house from the outside is enough to remind me how far I've come. That broken woman who worked 4 shifts on a row, only to come home and find her husband with another woman, she doesn't exist anymore. She's been replaced by someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who won't settle for less than she deserves. This is what I want you to take away from my story. Not just that bad things happened to me or that I got revenge on the people who hurt me. What I want you to understand is that you have power you don't even realize. The power to gather evidence, the power to seek justice, the power to rebuild your life, the power to transform your pain into purpose. If you're in a relationship with someone who's lying to you, stealing from you, betraying you, you don't have to stay. You don't have to keep sacrificing yourself for someone who wouldn't do the same for you. You can leave. You can fight back. You can demand better. And if you're watching this and you're feeling hopeless, feeling like there's no way out of your situation, I want you to know that I felt that way too. There were nights when I thought about just giving up, just accepting that this was my life and I had to make peace with it. But I didn't give up. And look at me now. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. The road from where I was to where I am now was long and painful and full of moments when I wanted to quit. But I kept going. I kept fighting. And eventually I made it through to the other side. You can too. Whatever you're facing, whatever situation you're in that makes you feel trapped or powerless or afraid, you can survive it. You can overcome it. You can build something better on the other side of it. Before I end this story, I want to tell you about something that happened last week. I was at the hospital taking care of a patient who'd come in after attempting to take her own life. She was young, maybe 30, and when I talked to her about what had driven her to that desperate act, she told me a story that sounded achingly familiar. Her husband had a gambling problem. He'd been stealing from her for years. He'd isolated her from her friends and family. He'd convinced her she was worthless, that she was lucky anyone would put up with her, that she had no options besides staying with him. She believed him until the night she found out he'd been having an affair and had gambled away their house. She felt like she had no reason to keep living if everything she'd worked for was gone. But she survived her attempt, and now she was in the hospital, and she was talking to me. I told her my story, not all of it. She didn't need to hear every detail, but enough that she understood I'd been where she was, that I'd felt that same hopelessness, that same belief that there was no way out. And I told her what I learned, that the way out exists even when you can't see it, that you're stronger than you think, that life after betrayal is possible, and it can be beautiful. When I left her room, she was crying, but they were different tears than when I had arrived. Not tears of despair, but tears of hope. She thanked me for sharing my story, for showing her survival was possible. That's why I'm telling you all of this, not for sympathy, not for attention, but because I know there are people out there who need to hear it. People who are in the situation I was in, working themselves to death for someone who doesn't appreciate it, believing lies because the truth is too painful to face, feeling trapped and powerless and alone. You're not alone. I was there too, and if I can make it through to the other side, so can you. So here's what I want you to do. If you're watching this story and you recognize yourself in it, I want you to take one small step towards taking control of your life. Maybe that's looking at your bank statements to see where the money is really going. Maybe it's confiding in a friend you've been isolated from. Maybe it's consulting with a lawyer to understand your options. Maybe it's just admitting to yourself that what's happening is not okay, that you deserve better, that change is necessary. One small step. That's all you need to start. Because every journey, no matter how long, begins with a single step. And once you take that first step, the next one becomes a little easier. And then the next one. And eventually, you look back and realize how far you've come. I'm living proof that transformation is possible, that you can go from being a victim to being a survivor, to being someone who helps other survivors find their strength. That pain can be turned into purpose. That betrayal can become the catalyst for building something better. Now I want to hear from you. Put your thoughts in the comments below. If you were in my situation, what would you have done? Would you have fought back the way I did, or would you have chosen a different path? Have you experienced betrayal like this, either personally or through someone you know? How did you handle it? What advice would you give to others in similar situations? And while you're down there in the comments, make sure you subscribe to Pressify Stories if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Give this video a thumbs up if it resonated with you or taught you something valuable. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. We have 90 stories of different genres on this channel. Stories of love and loss, triumph and tragedy, justice and redemption. Every story has something to teach, some lesson to share, some perspective to offer. And your support helps us keep telling these stories, keep sharing these truths, keep helping people who need to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to watch all the way to the end. I hope my journey from victim to survivor to victor gives you hope for your own journey, whatever that might look like. Remember, you're stronger than you think. You deserve better, and it's never too late to start over and build the life you truly want. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, the truth will always come to light. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to shine the light yourself. We'll see you in the next video. Bye!